With Pete Carroll fired and the #1 overall pick on their hands, the Las Vegas Raiders are facing a pivotal offseason. So let's dive into a full offseason strategy for the Raiders to try and right the ship in the 2026 offseason in today's debut rebuild episode of Best Available. Thank you for watching today's episode. I know we're trying something a little bit different, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, so let me know in the comments what you think of this rebuild, and if you want to see other teams in this series. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on socials at BestAvailableYT, and consider becoming a member to support the channel. I'll leave details to that in the episode description. You get additional benefits to the channel, including full access to my NFL Draft Big Board. We will go through a mock draft in here, so if you want to see some of the notes on the guys we're talking about, highly encourage you to check that out. But let's go ahead and dive into this rebuild. This rebuild episode is going to be cut into a few parts, from coaching to free agency to the NFL draft. But before we even begin, I need to make one thing very clear. This is not going to be an immediate turnaround for the Raiders. These moves are about long-term team building to turn this franchise around for the long haul, instead of trying to compete right away. Raiders fans saw last offseason that that kind of move simply does not work. Let's start with the head coaching search, because I think this is one of the more important things the Raiders need to look in the mirror at and make a more patient decision with this. The last 3 head coaches have been on awfully short leashes. None of them have lasted more than 2 seasons. And they need someone to stay patient, stay the course, slowly rebuild this team, and reset the culture. In this current hiring cycle, I think there's a couple of names that make sense. But based on your preference, I think there's 2 names that make a lot of sense from either a culture-building attitude standpoint or an offensive mindset for a potentially young #1 overall pick quarterback to rebuild the offense and make sure that the investment you're putting into the QB position is not wasted. Let's start with the culture builder, because obviously it makes a lot of sense on multiple angles why Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores is the odds-on favorite to win the job. A longtime assistant during the Tom Brady era in New England, Flores was only given 1 shot as a head coach in Miami. We could do an entire video about the controversy surrounding Flores' inability to find another job, but the fact of the matter is that he's been one of the most successful coordinators in the league in Minnesota and has earned another shot at a head coaching gig. Starting in 2023, Flores' Minnesota defenses have ranked 11th, 2nd, and 3rd in defensive DVOA, relentlessly blitzing opposing QBs and generating tons of splash plays. That kind of defensive play style and aggressiveness feels like a perfect culture fit for what the Raiders' identity has kind of always been. But at the same time, with a new quarterback likely coming through those doors, you would have to absolutely nail the offensive coordinator pick, which is easier said than done, which is why I might be leaning towards a more unproven name that could really get this offense humming right away, in Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator Klint Kubiak. Kubiak, the son of longtime NFL head coach Gary Kubiak, has quickly skyrocketed up the coaching ranks in recent years. His 2023 season as San Francisco's passing game coordinator helped Brock Purdy lead the NFL in passer rating, followed by a strong start to 2024 with the Derek Carr-led Saints, and then a strong season as the Seahawks offensive coordinator for a top 10 offense that helped give Seattle a first-round bye. The lack of head coaching experience for Kubiak is certainly a risk, and it's hard to tell from the outside looking in what kind of buy-in players would have from him, how he's wired, what his message would be, what kind of culture he wants to build. However, if the Raiders do take a quarterback in the first round, they need an offensive mind that can quickly turn this offense around and develop their franchise asset. And I just think that's where Kubiak becomes a more logical fit as a head coach. And I think John Spytek and Tom Brady understand that if they are going to take this swing on a quarterback, that they need to have the offense put in place so that they don't destroy his confidence right out of the gate. Moving on to free agency, and obviously there's a ton of moves the Raiders could make. They currently have $88 million in cap space, and Geno Smith is likely going to be cut, which is going to add another $8 million to that cap space. Dangers in the NFL of having all of this cap space. Some teams can be way too eager to overspend, take big swings on big names, and ultimately that doesn't really work out. And for what we're trying to rebuild here, I don't want to take swings on established names that might be overpriced. I want to build a long-term, sustainable franchise, find some good value in my free agents, find guys that want to be culture setters, have the right attitude, are going to compete, and understand that this process may not be an overnight turnaround. But these are the kind of things I'm thinking of as far as free agency. I've just seen too many teams, including the Raiders, that take all these big swings with their cap space, only to fall flat because they just overspent on names that maybe, weren't long-term pieces. So we will cut Geno Smith for this exercise. But before we get into re-signing anyone or signing free agents, we got to address the elephant in the room. Maxx Crosby's season ended on unpleasant terms after leaving the facility due to a disagreement over him playing against the Giants with the #1 pick on the line, and the trade rumors will be swirling all offseason. I'll be honest, I've gone back and forth on what to do with Maxx Crosby the entire time prepping for this video, and frankly, I'm still pretty torn. I can see both arguments to this. He is a player that will eventually start declining in play at 28 years old. He will be 29 next season. He's, at the peak of his powers. His trade value could not be higher. He's a guy that a lot of teams would want to have. There are teams like the Dallas Cowboys that have a clear need for pass rush that might be willing to give up tons of draft capital. So I can definitely appreciate and understand why people might want to move on from Crosby for the sake of the long-term rebuilding of the franchise. But at the same time, I don't know if there's another player on the Raiders roster that embodies the culture of the franchise historically more than Crosby. He's battled through some brutal seasons in Las Vegas and Oakland, and I just think he's one of these players that's still one of the top edges in the NFL, whether it's as a pass rusher, but more specifically as a run defender. I just think he's one of the best every down edges in the league. And it's one of those guys, like, I get that you want the draft capital, but at the end of the day, I want really good football players on my team that, set a culture and a standard for everyone else around them. Again, I understand that you could get some premium assets for Crosby. And if he wants out, then I think you have to listen to him. But for right now, with, so much unknown around his future, for the sake of this rebuild, I'm going to keep him. I like good football players. I like proven football players. And it may not be the best move long term if you're talking about draft capital, but I just want a guy that's going to set the culture and the standard in that locker room for a team that needs to start turning things around, because I think without him, I don't know who fills that void. Let's re-sign a few players as well with all of that cap space. If you look at the free agents on the Raiders roster, there aren't a ton of guys I'm super excited to bring back. Malcolm Koonce is a name I think you let walk. I think he's a decent rotational edge, but I just think I want some more starting pass rushing juice for my #2 guy, especially with Crosby being such an effective run stopper and drawing so much gravity and attention from opposing offenses. I want more of a guy that can really get after a quarterback, generate legitimate pressures. So we're gonna let him walk. But as far as re-signing, I think you have to re-sign Daniel Carlson. Still relatively young, one of the more consistent kickers in the league. I just think if you have a good kicker, they're way harder to find than you might think. You should keep those guys on your team, and I think that's a reasonable deal that you can get done with Carlson. We're going to talk a lot about the offensive line. I think there's a ton of upgrades that are needed on that unit. I know that Colton Miller will ideally be back next year. A healthy left tackle improves a lot of things, but you're going to need depth pieces, and I think that's why you should re-sign Dylan Parham, at least one of these solid depth at the very least guys. He's not going to be very expensive. I just think you're going to need some bodies that are competent and have playing experience on this offensive line. And the recurring theme we're going to talk about with that unit is competition. There might be some guys that are kind of established starters outside of Colton Miller. I really don't care. Give me as much competition at the other 4 spots as possible. We need depth, competition, and finding the best 5 starters out there. You have to protect your future franchise asset at quarterback. The entire linebacker room is leaving in free agency, at least the starters. Probably good riddance for Devin White, I'm sure, for Raiders fans. I watched a lot of your games. I don't know how you've dealt with having him on your team. That looks maddening. So I'm going to re-sign a Landon Roberts, and that's not, to say anything about his level of play or anything like that. But with the entire linebacker room leaving, you can't, draft an entire group of starters or sign them overnight. I think you bring back a Landon Roberts just because you're going to need some guys to eat snaps. Not every position you add in a single offseason is going to be a star player that's an immediate impact guy. Sometimes you just need to add cheap veteran options that are going to eat snaps for you. And that's just kind of the nature of the NFL. With the salary cap, you're not going to have, all pros, pro bowlers at every position. So I think a Landon Roberts makes a lot of sense as, get one of these starters back that didn't infuriate you the whole season, and then try and build and find some other options outside of him. Let's say even with front-loaded contracts, after cutting Geno, they had about $96 million in cap space. Feels like after some re-signings, they'll probably have somewhere between $70, $80 million in cap space for the rest of the free agency period. But again, I'm going to name a few targets, and I don't want these to be, high profile. I don't want to give Mike Evans $100 million, right? This is just not going to fit the timeline of what we're trying to do here. Again, long-term, sustainable rebuild for the future to just get things going in the right direction. So we're not going to overpay on splashy names at luxury positions. So let's dive into a few of these targets. And I'm going to give you a Bengals edge that is not Trey Hendrickson. This is probably one of those names I would avoid for a team like the Raiders. Hendrickson was clearly frustrated in his time in Cincinnati, holding out, wanting out, all of that. I don't want that on a rebuilding team. I think he'll have success elsewhere, but there is another edge out of Cincinnati and Joseph Osai that I'm pretty interested in. Osai had 43 pressures this year, was solid against the run, and I think he'd be a nice Malcolm Kuntz replacement to bolster the pass rush. Frankly, I think they should do a ton of homework on the edge free agent class because I think any name would really be valuable here, especially with Crosby staying or even if he doesn't. But frankly, even if Crosby stays, I think you look at edge in the free agent class because I don't think you're getting a top guy in the draft. Even if someone falls to the second round, I just think you're going to miss out on that top 1.5 tiers of edge rushers of guys that I really like. And I think there's kind of a sharp drop off at the position after that. I think Osai is yet to realize his full potential after a really strong season. And I think he'll be hungry to prove himself on a new franchise, which is why I think he's a pretty interesting pick for the Raiders to consider. With the departure of Jacoby Myers, I know they have some young guys in the wings trying to develop like Jack Besh, Dante Thornton, even Trey Tucker, who's a couple years in the league. But I do want an established veteran that can quickly become an outlet for my rookie quarterback. And with all the names I'm looking at here, I think Jawan Jennings is the one that stands out most to me. On top of it being a reunion with Klint Kubiak, Jennings has really ascended over the last 2 seasons with the 49ers, emerging as a reliable option despite multiple mouths to feed on that 49ers offense, putting up 132 catches for over 1,600 yards and 15 scores in 2 seasons. I still think Brock Bowers will be the number 1 target in 2026, but Jawan Jennings feels like one of these number 1 receiver, borderline number 2 guys that can be another consistent, reliable option in the passing game. I love that he has inside-out versatility. I think he's got some real toughness. I think he fits the Raiders' culture and what they would try to build pretty nicely. And again, a potential reunion with Kubiak, who would know his strengths and weaknesses before he even steps foot into the building. I just think it's, might be one of the bigger, heftier contracts they'd have to pay in free agency, but I think it's worth it to get a consistent option for your future quarterback. Again, a healthy Colton Miller is going to really help out this struggling offensive line, but the number 1 way to destroy a quarterback's confidence is with a bad O-line, especially younger guys, which is why I think you need to explore another tackle, guard, someone like that in free agency, which is where I land on Braden Smith from the Colts. O-line help needs to be the number 1 priority for the Raiders, both through free agency and the draft, assuming they take a quarterback number 1. And Braden Smith is going to be one of the more highly coveted tackles on the market. But I think the Raiders would be wise to try and be aggressive in trying to sign him as an upgrade over DJ Glaze. I don't want to quit on Glaze yet, and maybe he can compete at right tackle or kick inside to guard. But frankly, we just need competition and upgrades and talent at all 5 offensive line positions. That needs to be the priority here. So, for Glaze being a younger guy that's still trying to get his, acclimated, I kind of get wanting to develop him. But at the same time, Braden Smith has been a stalwart, solid right tackle in Indianapolis for years now. And I just think that's a potential add to improve this offensive line that's, too tempting to pass up on. Who else do you want to see the Raiders go after in free agency? I'm very curious for Raiders fans' thoughts here because obviously there's a ton of names and people always want the big flashy names. So I'm curious. Let me know who you want to see. Moving on to the mock draft. We are only going to do 5 rounds for a couple reasons. One, I never want to be disingenuous about the players I'm talking about, and I've frankly not watched 200 guys. I'm not gonna give you scouting reports I read off the internet on things on mock. I want this to be my own personal evaluations. I want this to be genuine and authentic for the mock draft. And 2, the Raiders have so many damn picks. It would just take another hour to do this video for a mock. So we're gonna go through 5 rounds. That's still what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 7, 8 picks, something like that. So let's go ahead and dive into this mock. Starting with the number 1 overall pick. Should not be a surprise, but it is, go Hoosiers, Indiana QB, Fernando Mendoza. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. He's a big-bodied pocket passer. Yes, he's a little goofy. He has a little bit of athleticism, but what I love about this guy is his processing, his quick release, his ability to throw at all 3 levels of the field, fairly comfortable in the middle of the field. His superstar trait to me is just that competitive toughness. The guy has taken some bad hits, including like the first play of the game in the Big Ten Championship against Ohio State, shakes that off and leads the Hoosiers to a win. The mental toughness is also a huge part of that. This is a guy that will throw an interception in a tough moment. I think of that Oregon game. I think Iowa didn't go his way. And he always bounces back. Like every time he makes a bad play, he makes up for it and continues to help lead the Hoosiers. I think he's excellent under duress. A game-winning touchdown against Iowa is a good example of that. I think he is built to be an NFL quarterback. He checks so many boxes for me, but I think it's that toughness and his goofy, authentic personality. Yeah, you can call him a nerd or a dork. I think the authenticity is what matters most. I think players, teammates will absolutely love him. I think coaches will love him. I just think he is a home run pick for the Raiders, the number 1 overall pick, as long as they are patient and build around him and not try to win right away. With their second pick, 36th overall, listen, if Emmanuel Pregnon, the guard out of Oregon, is there, I am sprinting that card up to the commissioner, because this could not be a better pick in the second round for a Raiders team that needs offensive line help. Pregnon is currently 31st on my big board, my number 1 interior offensive lineman. He's a fluid, high IQ prospect. He's got excellent athletic ability and strong hands. He can be an asset as a run blocker, a puller, in pass protection. He's, again, high IQ. He does everything quickly. Like, this guy checks so many boxes for what I want in a guard. I think this would be an easy slam dunk pick if he's there in the second round. The cornerback room has not been addressed yet in this offseason rebuild, and I get it. Like, we're going to want some new bodies there. You had freaking Eric Stokes starting for you last year. So we're going to go Keontae Scott in the 3rd round. You can't, fix every position in one offseason, and maybe we're letting corner slide a little too much. But Keontae Scott here feels like a really fun addition. You probably remember him for the pick 6 against Ohio State to lead them in that big upset win over the Buckeyes. Because that downhill explosiveness is his calling card. It's a 6-foot, 195-pound corner. He triggers downhill well. His tackling technique is solid. He fires downhill. He stays low. He's pretty disciplined in the open field. His missed tackle rate might be a bit higher than you're thinking of the way I'm describing him. It's probably because his length is a little limited. That might be an issue to be like a press man corner at the NFL level. But I think that trigger and that mentality and aggressiveness and how he plays the run, I think he's an excellent run defender on top of being a solid coverage corner. I just think he's a guy I want on the boundary, on the perimeter for my football team. Seems like a really fun ad, and a guy, again, I think he's wired the right way to be a Raider. With the first of 3 4th-round picks, we're going to add more to the offensive line depth. I just think it could not be more important. Let's go Brian Parker II out of Duke. Might not be a household name for a lot of guys, but this is someone that's pretty fluid, has strong hands, can do a nice job of getting in front of and sealing off blockers. He was a right tackle in college. But that limited length, again, the lack of measurables are something that are going to be a little bit of a concern if he has to play tackle at the NFL level. I'm fine with it. I think this is one of those guys. I'm not drafting Parker to be a starter, but I am drafting him to be depth. And I think he can fill some backup spots at multiple roles, be cross-trained, be ready to be a fill-in starter at multiple spots. A name I always think of in recent years is Patrick McCarry, who was with the Ravens, is one of these guys. I think he played like all 5 positions in Baltimore. I think Parker is one of these guys we can cross-train with his athletic ability and experience at tackle, that he can play multiple positions and be a solid depth piece. With the second of those 3 4th-round picks, give me Jacob Rodriguez, the linebacker out of Texas Tech. What a fun story he was, from being a quarterback / Taysom Hill role at Virginia to a Heisman hopeful for the Red Raiders as a former walk-on that transferred to Texas Tech. Just an incredible story all around. Yeah, he's a little bit undersized, but this man has some of the best IQ and post-snap processing of a linebacker prospect. His motor, it plays with his hair on fire. I think he's got really nice play speed to pursue sideline to sideline. Obviously excellent at forcing turnovers, whether it was interceptions or forced fumbles. And I think he's got some underrated strength to him. For being a 235-pound linebacker, I think this is one of those guys that can at least, throw his face into blocks and not get completely washed out. Linebacker's obviously like a vacant role at this point in the rebuild, even after re-signing a Landon Roberts. So let's go ahead and add Jacob Rodriguez to the fold. I think he can quickly become, a fan favorite in this roster. I just think he'd be a really fun add to hopefully, get his feet wet as a rookie, get all that playing time, get those snaps, and hopefully become, a reliable starter in year 2-3. Let's add another edge here. I know we signed Joseph Osai from the Bengals in free agency, but I want that edge depth, especially if, let's say, we keep Crosby, but things go south and he wants out in the middle of the season. You're going to need some backup plans. I think Kenyatta Jackson is one of these guys I'd be very interested in. 6'5", 265 pounds. He has really good technique taking on to the run with low pad level. He can anchor down. I think he has a good hand usage to, shock and shed and get disengaged. Think about one of these like big-bodied edge setters. He can win with a power as a pass rusher. He can, drive his legs, whether it is against the run or the pass. I'm not going to draft this guy as a speed fluid, speed rusher kind of guy, but I think this is an early down edge setting kind of guy that would be a valuable rotational edge in this draft class. Unfortunately, Ole Miss's run came to an end, but we are going to wrap up this mock draft in the 5th round with Xavier Harris, the defensive lineman out of Ole Miss. Just one of your classic, run-stopping interior defenders, 330 pounds, 6'8", like, Galactus-sized nose tackle. He's got power. He can stop the run. He can, move shade out of the center a little bit. I think he's got better speed than I was expecting, but at the same time, I'm not drafting this guy to be a pass rusher. That's going to be, a passing situation guy. This is my early down. Give me the beef on the line. Stop the run. If you add all these bodies and have him in the middle of it, I think it could be really a nice way to start building around the trenches and the defense as a whole. So there you have it. That is our mock draft, our free agents, our re-signings, the Maxx Crosby situation, the head coaching candidates. And that's our rebuild. So Klint, Kubiak at head coach, cut Geno, keep Max, re-sign Carlson, Roberts, the guard that I'm totally blanking on right now, followed by this mock draft. So let me know in the comments what you think of this rebuild. Again, I'm not doing this to go viral with splashy big names. We're trying to build sustainable growth for a franchise that's struggled to find its way back into contention. So let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know what you think of the rebuild series and if we should continue this going forward. We will be back on Monday after the college football playoff semifinals, the wild card weekend. So much to talk about. Cannot wait to dive into it with all of you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.